in short, an NDE, near-death experience, is a profound psychological event that may occur to a person close to, or if not near, death in a situation of physical or emotional crisis. But, there's two elements to the near-death experience. There's the transcendental element of it, which is sort of mystical and kind of mysterious and a little bit more hard to nail down as far as if it was real, quote unquote, or not. And then there's the other side of it, which is the veridical side, which, it's stories of people hearing conversations in other rooms when their body was laying in one room and stuff like that.
Right.
And we're actually not going to focus too much on that stuff, even though that's the more, I guess, compelling evidence if you're a scientist, because it grounds, there's verifiable evidence, so to speak, with these experiences, so, but, I don't know. Have you ever had a near-death experience, Basil?
I have been near death, but I have not had what we like to call a near-death experience. I don't know if that's a blessing or not, but, I'm open to it.
Yeah, and we should note that, nobody should really base their theology based on a near-death experience necessarily. I think you can take what's good, take out what may not align biblically and stuff like that. But it seems like people who have a near-death experience, it's sort of shaped by what their belief systems were in real life.
Right.
So
yeah, it is interesting because, as Christians, we hear a lot of Christian-based or influenced near-death experiences where people see Jesus or angels or experience hell or heaven. But there are stories out there of Buddhists having near-death experiences. And
what, do they see Buddha or something?
yeah, I think I heard the story of this Buddhist guy who died and then had a near-death experience where he was like in a boat, like in a rowboat in a lake, like fishing with Buddha or something. Don't quote me on that, but I do remember hearing something about that. So by all means, these are experiences that people have had, but there's still some value to glean from hearing about them.
Sure. So we'll give you some facts here about the near-death experience, just so you guys can have a little bit of head knowledge before we completely go off the rails here with the stories. And a lot of this information we got from IANDS.org, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It's a real thing. It is looked at seriously by scientific-minded people. And, they come up with a bunch of common characteristics of the near-death experience. And, we won't go through all of them, but keep some of these in the back of your mind as you listen to the story, because the stories do report some of these things. But a couple of them are a sense of being outside of one's physical body, a sense of movement through darkness or a tunnel, intense emotions, heightened perception, perceiving a spiritual realm, which may include vividly memorable landscapes and encounters with deceased loved ones, spiritual beings, and or religious figures. So there you go.
Yeah. And then, there's knowledge of nature or of the universe sort of inherent in these things. Commonly a life review or a sense of oneness and interconnectedness or a border of no return that exists somewhere, a sense of having knowledge of the future or the past, or even sometimes receiving messages regarding a life's purpose.
Right. And most of the experiences report a feeling of peace and joy and love, and some of them are not so peace, love, and joy, which we'll exemplify in one of our stories. But the thing that's really interesting is that almost everybody that has a near-death experience comes back and claims that they are changed.
Right. Well, the earliest known near-death experience was recounted by Plato in his writings, The Myth of found at the end of Book 10 of the Republic, written in 420 BC. And the accounts can be found in folklore and writings of the Europeans or Middle Eastern or Africans or Indian, really all over the place.
Yeah, it's all over the world. It's not just an American phenomenon seeing Jesus. So,
right.
But, a survey that was done of how many people have had NDEs. The survey was between the US, Australia, and Germany. They suggested that somewhere between 4 and 15% of the population have had NDEs.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
And as you stated before, there's two different categories of near-death experiences. There's the veridical that can be verified, and there's many case studies that go along with this. And we'll actually put a link, I think, to one of them. And then transcendental, which they're experiences that can't necessarily be verified, usually really mystical or intense, but still experiences. And there are critics of near-death experiences. There's always very logical scientific types who just say, NDEs are hallucinations. But the response to those people is, hallucinations are usually and medically illogical, fleeting, bizarre, distorted, just very weird. Whereas the vast majority of NDEs are very logical, orderly, clear, and comprehensible, and people really remember them, and they really, really affect their lives. Whereas with hallucinations caused by, any sort of dementia or mental illness, usually are very fleeting and really cause more confusion than anything else.
Or drugs, right?
Right, drugs. Yeah. Well, ketamine and psilocybin are two drugs that have reportedly triggered sort of the same kind of mystical experiences.
Mushrooms.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. A man named Carl Jensen has written more than anyone else about NDE, like ketamine experiences, like drug-induced sort of experiences.
Right.
Says, and I quote, "After 12 years of studying ketamine, I now believe that there most definitely is a soul that is independent of experience. It exists when we begin and may persist when we end. Ketamine is a door to a place we cannot normally get to. It is definitely not evidence that such a place does not exist." So even after studying the effects of drugs on consciousness, Carl Jansen says himself that, there's definitely more to the experience than drugs.
Right. And for those of you who don't know what ketamine is, it is a drug.
It's awesome. I don't know.
Highly recommended by Basil, apparently.
Sounds awesome.
I think I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but I know that ketamine can be attained through the use of getting horse tranquilizer. Don't ask me how I know that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so where to get ketamine. Maybe we should make our own little case study.
Maybe we take a trip south.
Just kidding, everybody.
Yeah, we're just joking around here. And I know this is a serious matter, but we gotta.
Quote.
Yeah, I can see it now. Basil and Gons are on ketamine and mushrooms.
I mean, there's already all sorts of stuff about us out there, I'm sure.
The birds of Babylon. We won't get into that. Anyway.
The birds of Babylon.
One of the biggest common denominators of an NDE, which we mentioned earlier, it actually comes from Raymond Moody, who was actually the person who coined the phrase, the near-death experience, based on a book that he wrote called Life After Life back in 1975. Here's what he had to say. Quote, "There is one common element in all near-death experiences. They transform the people who have them. In my 20 years of intense exposure to NDEs, I have yet to find one who hasn't had a deep and positive transformation as a result of his experience." So that's a medical doctor who studied people who have this experience for 20 years, saying that he's never had one person come back and say,
well, this weird thing happened.
That was weird. Business as usual.
Yeah.
Back to normal life.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was funny. The creator of South Park.
I do.
What was his name? I can't remember.
Cartman. Eric Cartman.
Seth something.
No, that you're thinking of Seth MacFarlane?
Yeah.
No, that's not. He's not the South Park guy.
Or not South Park. Sorry.
That's Family Guy.
Family Guy. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Sorry. So Seth MacFarlane, they talked about, there was a report that said, oh, Seth MacFarlane had a near-death experience. And really, he didn't. He just missed. He was supposed to be on the flight that hit the Twin Towers back in 2001.
He nearly died.
Experience. Yeah. And that didn't change him profoundly. But it's because he didn't see the other side. But anyway. So there's been a lot of books written on the near-death experience, or actually just people's experience of the NDE.
Right.
And I mean, it's a whole market, I mean, we can, I'm actually thinking about, having a little self-induced NDE so we can start making some cash, Basil.
Okay. That sounds like a cockamamie scheme I can jump on board with.
Anyway, no, but there's a ton. I mean, you go to Amazon, you just type in near-death experience, and you're going to get tons of stuff. Some of the more popular ones.
A lot of very recent ones, too.
Yeah, it's a recent phenomenon. I don't know why people are more interested in it recently, but...
Writing the books is
writing the books. Phenomenon. Yeah, the writing the books. Proof of Heaven, A Neurosurgeon's Journey into the Afterlife by Ibn Alexander. This one's pretty popular. Near-death experiences, real suicide survivor stories. You got Heaven is Real. Heaven Exists. Proof of Life After Death. Real stories of near-death experiences. Book 1. To Heaven and Back. A doctor's extraordinary account of her death, heaven, angels, and life again. A true story.
That's a doozy.
These titles have like 3 subtitles on each one.
To Heaven and Back kind of reminds me of the book Bilbo Baggins was writing. There and Back Again by Bilbo Baggins.
Dying to Be Me. I don't know if I'm dying to be Anita Morjani, who's the author. My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. And then there's My Journey to Heaven, What I Saw and How It Changed My Life. Marvin J. Bestman.
Beastman.
Besty man.
Bestie man. Okay.
And wasn't there a movie recently about a boy
Heaven is for Real.
Yeah.
That's the most I think the most popular one right now. Yeah, it was a big Hollywood movie.
Right.
And never saw it. I heard it was good.
I never saw it either, but I know that Christians were going cuckoo with they're doing Christian, because it came out right around the same time as Noah.
There's a lot of Christian movies coming out lately.
Yeah.
But that's for another podcast.
Yeah. But not just the stories that were relayed. There's been a lot of books written by doctors and PhDs and stuff. Just to name a couple, you have Consciousness Beyond Life, The Science of the Near-Death Experience by Pim van Lommel. Near-Death Experience as Evidence for the Existence of God in Heaven, A Brief Introduction in Plain Language by J. Steve Miller and Jeffrey Long, MD. So, again,
I hope y'all are taking
doctor.
notes so you can look these up.
Yeah, or you can just go to Amazon.
Or that.
And type in.
Because that's what you did,
That's
didn't
what
you?
I did. Hardcore research. Science and the Near-Death Experience, How Consciousness Survives Death by Chris Carter. So, there's a lot of this stuff going on with people discussing the science behind it, what it means. A lot of New Agers have picked up on some of this stuff of, this is consciousness beyond our life and things like that. So,
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yes. But also, the internet exists now. And with YouTube, many, many more people have been able to actually record their story and put it on YouTube for everybody to hear. And it's actually, I think, might be the best thing that's ever happened to the NDE community, because you can just watch hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of people telling their near-death experience story.
Right.
And, I say this because you and I have watched hours and hours and hours and hours of NDE stories on YouTube, and there are a lot of good ones. There are a lot of weird ones, but there are also a lot of good ones. And one of them is a story told by a Mr. Sean Weed.
Yeah, and before we dive into that, most of the accounts that you hear about NDEs are really positive, but there are some negative ones, and I just want to note a couple of them, because if we don't at least mention them, we're going to get the, why didn't you mention this one? And we'll still probably get that. But there was a book called A Near-Death Experience, I Died and Came Back from Hell by Grady Mosby. And then there was the famous Howard Storm is another famous guy who talked about a horrific experience when he had a near-death experience and saw hell and demons and all kinds of stuff. And Bill Weiss is another gentleman who has, I think his book is called 23 Minutes in Hell, where he allegedly descended down to hell and whatnot. And interestingly enough, I actually spoke to someone, this is a few years ago, but I was, doing my thing, teching at a church event, and this guy that just happened to be there in the room with me started telling me about his experience of going to hell, and he was telling me how it's real and it's scary and all this stuff. So there is that other side.
Yes, it exists. And actually, now that you mention it, this story that Sean Weed tells us is similar. He tells a story about dying and going to hell and being sent back. His video has almost 39,000 views on YouTube, and I think it's an interesting one.
My name is Sean Weed. I was born not born, but raised in Bernice, Louisiana, a small town, population 2,500. Technically right outside of it in a small community by the name of Pisgah.
Sean Weed was in the military. He was a military man for a long time.
When I was 19 years old, I joined the Marine Corps.
And one day he was able to take leave.
I was at that time not what I would consider a Christian. I'd grown up in a Baptist church. I knew about heaven and hell and, as much as anyone can know. At that time, I was pretty much doing my own thing, living my own life, my own way.
He was broke, same with some of his friends, and he decided to stay on base instead of go out. So he was hanging out with his buddies one night in their bunk.
In 110 degree sweltering weather, because it was just really nothing else to do at camp.
And he tells a little story about how in their bunk there's a noose hanging from the A-frame of the building. Now, it wasn't a noose like somebody was trying to hang themselves. He explains that as soldiers, they get really bored. And when somebody finds some rope, soldiers find all sorts of ways to entertain themselves. This particular noose was no danger to anybody. Nobody was planning on killing themselves. In fact, the noose hung from the ceiling all the way down to about a foot off the ground.
I was worried about hanging themselves. You'd have to lay down on the ground to hang yourself with this thing, literally. And of course, it was made of hay rope. So
he goes into detail about how there's no way anybody could actually kill themselves. One of Sean's buddies in his bunk was a great photographer. He had taken pictures of the impact zones, and Sean spoke very highly of his work.
He drove right into it and got right up on the edge of the impact area and took some amazing photos. He was one of those guys that was intelligent, but at the same time was always willing to push the barriers of stupidity, which he did. But needless to say, the photos that he took were absolutely stunning.
Well, it was this same buddy who thought he had a great idea for the last picture in his roll of film. He asked Sean to go over to the noose, lie down, slip into it for a picture.
I got an idea. He said, "Hey, Reed, why don't you go over there and stick your head inside that noose and act like you're dead, and I'll take the last picture." I'm like, okay.
His photographer buddy was giving him some advice on how best to look dead.
He's like, "All right, now let your arms dangle loose. Now close your eyes. Relax them. Don't make any wrinkles. Stick your tongue out a little. Cock your head to the side a little bit. And he's giving me all these instructions so that it would make a real-looking photo.
But his camera ran out of batteries, so he went to go put in a new one. At this time, Sean's other friend snuck up behind him, and jokingly tightened the noose around his neck.
Slammed it down around my throat, just as I had exhaled.
Sean's buddies noticed this and thought it was all a big joke.
Immediately I stood up, stunned, because I didn't know, number one, I didn't know that he was sneaking up behind me. Number two, I just got this rope slammed down around my neck. And number three, I couldn't breathe. And I knew I had just seconds left, maybe 6 to 8 seconds, because I had just exhaled and I couldn't breathe back in.
He frantically began to try to loosen the noose, but it was no use. No use loosening the noose.
I said to myself, I have one shot, one chance to get this right. Otherwise, I'm a dead man. I closed my eyes and I clenched my teeth and I pulled for everything that I was worth.
After struggling and struggling, Sean finally got loose of the noose and walked over to sit next to his friends. He talks about watching his friends sitting on the bunk, eating snacks, looking in their bag. Nothing was different. And as he's sitting there with his buddies,
he leans over and he looks at me right in the face. He's only 4 feet away from me. He leans over and he looks me right in the face. He goes, I don't think he's playing. Of course, we're the only 3 in the room, so I'm just like, what's he talking about? So Jason Laycock and I turn and look back, and sure enough, there's my body hanging from the noose. Needless to say, I was completely shocked. So I immediately, just shocked, I just stood up, and I turned and faced my body, which was hanging from that noose roughly about 30 feet away. And I walked out and I walked over closer till I was about, maybe 15 feet away so I could get a better look. And sure enough, it was definitely me. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking to myself, how can I be there and here at the same time? And I look down and I'm sure enough I'm wearing the same green t-shirt, the same brown web belt, the same camouflage pants, the same black boots. I even pulled my dog tags out and I was still wearing them. I looked at my hand and I realized that if I stared at my hand, I could see through my hand and see the sand on the ground. And that's when I realized I was dead. And I had been dead and sitting next to my friends for 5 minutes, and then I realized they didn't even know I was there. They couldn't see me.
At first, the soldiers didn't realize the seriousness of the situation.
He goes, now that's a good picture, and snaps the last photo. The film began to rewind. Toby Page walked up and looked beside him and just gave him this stupid look
and finally told him to stop joking around.
His nose is blue, his lips are blue, his eyelids are blue. There's drool hanging out of his mouth all the way down to the ground. Are you a bleeping retard? Jason Laycock stood up, took a couple steps forward, and then realized that what he was saying was true. He saw that my extremities on my face were blue, so he tossed his camera off over towards his rack, not really caring for its care at all where it landed. He just tossed it. And he ran forward and he grabbed my body around the waist and picked up. When he did this, he screamed for Corporal Page to come over there and get the noose off my neck.
Now at this point, Sean takes some action, and I think this might be a useful thing to remember if anybody listening finds themselves in a similar situation. He tries to step back into his body.
And bad idea. When I tried that, when I stepped forward trying to step forward into my body, it was just like somebody slugged me. I mean, just as hard as I could possibly be hit. And the sense of vertigo came over, it overtook me and just weakened me. So I actually stumbled backwards, like dizzy.
Despite this, he tries it again.
I thought, okay, well, this is my opportunity. My body's not moving around anymore. It's laying down. It's, in a stable position. I'll just lay back down into my body. And so that's pretty much what I did. I placed my foot inside of my foot and my other foot inside my foot, and I sat down just like I'm sitting now. And I looked back and saw how my body was laying and how my head was positioned, so I just leaned back into my body. And as soon as my head falls inside my head, I'm instantaneously standing up. And I'm in complete darkness. I mean, it's a darkness that you could almost feel. I know that sounds weird, it doesn't make any sense, but that's the only way that I can put it. I mean, because this darkness had like a texture to it. And it was complete darkness. It was just solid black. And I know the first thing I thought to myself is, well, where am I, you know? And I had no clue where I was. I was still wearing everything that I'd been wearing before, only I was just in this place that I didn't recognize at all. And the first thing I noticed is that there is nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing.
So he finds himself in complete blackness, a total void, with no floor, no sky, nothing around him, just a tangible darkness.
I thought to myself, well, if I was in a completely dark room, I wouldn't be able to see my hand in front of my face. How is it that I'm able to see what? There's light coming from somewhere. And so I looked up, because that's where pretty much all sources of light are, whether you're inside or outside, they're above you. So I looked up, and I see nothing. And that's when I realized that I was the one that was emanating the light that I was able to see with. I was glowing like a chem light.
And in this darkness, he's not alone.
From that point, I became very scared.
Before he knows it, there's a being who wraps his hand around his shoulder and neck. He describes it as a demon.
Of course, for me, I didn't know what had happened. It was like getting hit by a truck and having no clue that it was ever coming. This thing had come up behind me so fast, and it caught me by complete surprise, and it was so big. I can't possibly begin to describe what it's like being in the grips of something that big. And I had this pain just shooting from my head to my feet like a bolt of electricity, but it's not stopping. It's like being constantly shocked or electrocuted. And I had this pounding sensation, just hurting pounding sensation coming from my left shoulder that hurts even worse than this electricity that's running through my body. And I look to my left and I see these fingers which come down to roughly the bottom of my chest. I mean, it literally went from the side of my neck out to maybe past the end of my shoulder, the width of its hand.
He describes the demon in detail.
The color of its skin was
black and oily and red.
I'm watching these giant red fingers with blackness moving through it. Now, like I said, I don't know if it was shadows or if it was a substance beneath the skin.
He talks about how in this place, anything you want to know, you know. You ask a question and it's answered for you.
This thing had a hold of me, and I'm looking down at these fingers and I'm just thinking to myself, what is this that has a hold of me? And as I'm thinking this, I understand now that anything that you think in this place can be heard as if you had spoken it out loud. And this thing had me like this and was just smiling at me. It looked back and it was smiling at me, waiting for me to look at it. And when I looked over my shoulder and up at it, it was already staring at me. And I understand now that it had heard what I was thinking and just wanted to give me a nice little shock, you know, on top of the pain that I was already experiencing. Overall, the thing, I know this sounds already more crazy than everything that I've already said, but this thing is 13 feet tall. And it's not like I sat there and said, okay, stand still, let me grab a step ladder and measure you. Where's my tape measure? You know, no. Anything that you want to know in this place, all you have to do is ask it. Ask it in your mind or ask it out loud, and the answer will be given to you. It doesn't matter. And I thought to myself, how big is this thing? And the answer immediately came to me, 13 feet. It was exactly 13 feet tall.
And as it traveled, it was moving incredibly fast.
If I would guess, I would say probably at over 80 to 100 miles an hour. It may have been faster than that, I don't know. But all I know is the thing was moving very, very fast. There was nothing at all I could do to get away or anything like that. And I looked at its face for only a second, and it was enough to scare me. And it would be enough to scare anybody, I'm pretty sure.
And if this experience of being swept up by a demon in a total black void was not enough, Sean describes the emotional effect of his experiences. He talks about how all hope is completely drained from him. How hope at this time seemed like a tangible substance and that it was simply non-existent.
Literally felt hope and emotion as if it were a physical substance, like water in a cup just being poured out of me. I literally felt hope pour out of me, starting from the inside of my head. It just drained out of my body all the way down and right out through my feet. And once hope left me, it was like I became numb. It was just like I was just drained completely of all strength. Any energy that I had was just gone.
And in this absence of hope, he begins to realize some very important things.
I don't know if this is in the Bible or not, but I think that the strength of hope is in God. You know, and without God, without any hope, you don't really have a reason to live. You don't have a reason to fight. You don't have any strength whatsoever. So without hope, you don't have strength.
With this absence of hope, he finally just resigned himself to the demon's will. He had a question, though. He thought in his head, where am I being taken? Where am I going? What's going to happen to me?
The answer was, it's taking you to hell. Now, when I grew up in a Baptist church, I was taught hell was fire and brimstone. That's an empty void of an area. But that's also in the Bible, too. We just don't pay much attention. And they shall be cast out into outer darkness, where there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The outer darkness that they're speaking of is where I landed. When I understood that, it was mortally appalling, is the only way I can put it. I mean, it played over and over in my head again. It's taking me to hell. It's taking me to hell.
But then Sean had a thought. He thought he wasn't such a bad guy. He didn't deserve to go to hell. This wasn't supposed to be happening.
It wasn't like into drugs or, anything like that. I mean, I was just an average guy. I go to church every once in a while, so I didn't really picture myself as bad. Not bad enough to end up in hell, but one thing that I understand now is there's plenty of good people in hell. A lot of people that used to call themselves Christians are there. And it's because they didn't really devote their life to God. They lived one foot in and one foot out like I did, And you don't have to be a bad person to go to hell. All you have to do is just be average. God doesn't call us to be average. He calls us to be holy, like He is, And what that really means is you gotta, for lack of better words, you don't have to become a Bible-thumping Christian, but you should devote your life to God for as much as you possibly can. And if that puts me in the category of Bible-thumping Christian, then so be it. I'm a Bible-thumping Christian. I would rather be that than in the middle, because I know where the in the middle gets you. It gets you in the same place that being fully against Him gets you. It's kind of like He said in Revelations 3:20, I wish that you were all the way for me or all the way against me, but because you were in the middle, because you were lukewarm, I spit you out. Now I don't want to be that again. I don't want to go back to hell. I know it's there, and I know the place is not made for us. It was made for them, and we just unfortunately do not realize the reality of the place. The reality of the place is far worse than you can imagine, and I only experienced a taste of it. I landed on the doorstep of hell, is the way I like to look at it. Or you can even say I landed in the middle of hell, but it wasn't fire and brimstone, although I know for certain that it does exist, because that's where it was taking me. And although I never laid eyes on the flames, I know that they really do exist.
And it was then that he saw a pinpoint of light off into the distance. The light moved back and forth, and Sean didn't know if he was changing direction or if that point of light was moving itself. And before he could think, like a flash of lightning, the point of light came rushing towards him, and he was soon enveloped in white, blinding light. It was an angel, and the angel reached his hand towards Sean.
Blinding white light, and his hand was reaching down to me, and it was an angel. It's all right. And my hand just reached up and grabbed its hand. I was thinking to myself, I'm going to reach up there and grab his hand, and this hand is going to save me, because that's all that I saw was just a hand. And as soon as I touched his hand, we were all motionless and all standing back up on this ground that you can't see.
And as the angel, the demon, and Sean were caught motionless in this black void, Sean finally has a chance to take a good look at the angel who is there to rescue him. He describes the angel like this.
The angel itself, to describe it for you, was 9 feet 6 inches tall. It had brown wavy hair pushed to the back. It had an olive color skin. It wasn't really white, wasn't really black. It was somewhere in between, but the light that was emanating from within it was so bright white that it almost practically overshadowed the color of its skin. You couldn't even really, you had to stare to see the color of its skin. And I keep saying it because it's an it. It's not really a he or a she. I mean, when you look at this angel, you think to yourself, wow, he is beautiful. And I know that's some odd words to say, but this angel was absolutely beautiful. There's no other words for it. Its eyes were blue, and when I mean blue, I mean perfect blue, like someone took a portion of the sky and put it in its eyes, or dipped a cup out of the ocean and poured it into its eye. There was no flaw in it, no flaw. He had on a white robe. It was cut down in a V in the front. The sleeves came just below the elbows, and this robe was kind of like a white Roman tunic robe. I guess that would be the best way of putting it. And it came just below its knees. I was just so blown away by the beauty of it that I didn't even really check to see if it had any shoes on or not. I don't really remember. All I know is it was big. Not as quite as big as the demon, but big enough. And I'm looking up at it, and I'm just blown away by its brightness and its beauty.
Sean knew that the angel was there to save him, but he also knew that he didn't deserve it. He was in hell for a reason, and he was where he belonged.
Once you're there in hell, you don't normally get a chance to leave. So it owned me like a piece of furniture.
The demon knew this too, and it didn't know why it was being interfered with.
And it wanted to know why it was being stopped, so it turned around and was ready to fight. Make no mistake. This demon was ready to get down in the worst way. As it whipped around, this angel its speed was incredible, and it just rushed forward and with an open palm hit this demon, and it had to angle its arm upwards at about the height of its head to hit this demon in the chest. And it hit this demon with such power. I mean, I can't describe the fierceness of the power of this thing, but it hit this demon with such force that its hand was literally ripped from my shoulder. It had no clue what had hit it. By the time it had even turned its head, it was already hit.
And as the demon was ejected backwards, the angel turned towards Sean and called him by his heavenly name.
And this angel looked at me and he called me by a long name. And I immediately understood it to be mine. It was a heavenly name. But as soon as it called me this name, it took it from my mind. It called me this name to let me know that I still have a chance to make it into heaven. Like I have a heavenly name. I squandered it. I wasted it. And if this had been my ultimate time, my last breath for real, that's where I would have stayed.
The angel was there not only to rescue Sean from the demon, but to let him know that he was being given a second chance at life. And when Sean heard the angel call him by this name, he says it felt like home.
Like when your mom calls you for dinner or supper, however you want to say it, you know that it's time to go in and eat and you're all happy, because you just stayed outside playing forever, and you're about to go in and sit with your family. It was like that. It was a feeling of home.
It was now that the angel revealed his own name.
He looks at me and he says, "Hello, my name is Michael." Well, I immediately knew that this was the archangel of the Bible that it spoke of the archangel Michael. And I can tell you for certain, I've seen them both. I've seen the archangel and I've seen Jesus, and they look nothing alike. And they are not the same being.
But the demon wasn't finished. He was coming back for more.
And it was getting bigger. It was running back after me, and it was getting faster, and it was getting bigger, so it was coming back after me, from this great distance that this angel hit it. And so I look back at him like, whatever you got to say, please just hurry up and say it. And if you're going to get me out of here, please get me out of here. And this is what I was literally thinking, and he just looked at me and he gave me a saddened look. And he looked at me and he just goes, "Your time has not yet come. It's time for you to go." And he points his finger, and when I stepped in that direction,
it was time for Sean's second chance. And in the blink of an eye, he was back inside of his body.
Laying on that cot where I knew I should have, my eyes opened. And it took me a good 20 minutes to get to walking again, simply because my entire body had fallen asleep.
Sean's physical body had been dead for 8 minutes. For him to come back to life must have been a huge shock to the soldiers around him. But I think there is a reason that he was given a second chance. Maybe even just to tell his story and have it live on YouTube. Or maybe so we could tell you the story. So Sean's experience is a very intense one. But what do we know about what happens when we die? What does the Bible say?
Yeah, the Bible actually has quite a bit to say. First off, I think the most important thing is that the hope that we have is a physical bodily resurrection. Jesus rose from the dead, and he was the first fruits, and he rose in a body. It wasn't just a spirit that he rose in, so
right.
That's number one. So we have to remember that, this idea of an afterlife, it's almost kind of misdirection, because it's not really this, we're not going to just hang out without a body forever. The hope is that we will rise again in a physically raised body. So
right. Yeah, I mean, the Hebrew view is that the physical body is somehow intertwined with the soul,
right,
and not sort of separate.
Right, the spirit in the body creates the soul, and that's
right.
Yeah.
And the modern, Christian sort of viewpoint is that there is some sort of separation, and we're not trying to make a case either way. Obviously, the stories of near-death experiences do talk about, as Sean had this experience, being separate, being able to look at his body from the outside, sort of seeing a ghostly, ethereal version of himself.
Right.
having experiences. So that we can't speak against people's experiences.
But again, with the Hebrews as well, one of their customs was to preserve the bones because, their thing was the body is going to raise again. So kind of the question, when you look at 1 Corinthians 15:42, it says, "So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable."
I kind of like that. It kind of talks about the human body, a deceased human body, as like a seed.
Right, exactly. And you look at the question that I had was, what happens to the people who were cremated and stuff? What about, because their bones are gone, are they just gonna, what about them?
Right.
And I think in the resurrection, God will rebuild a new body for them with new atoms and stuff like that.
Well, they could even, again, this is not a dogmatic, the theocratic debate we're having, but even if somebody is cremated, the atoms that compose their body are still the atoms that exist. They're just in a different form,
Sure, yeah.
Atoms just don't disappear. So, just logically and scientifically speaking, if God wanted to raise a cremated person back into a new body, I'm sure he could gather up all those little ashy atoms and rebuild something, if he wanted to.
Right.
Just saying.
So yeah, that's a good point. And again, we're made from the dust of the earth. So technically, I think whatever constitutes the immortal bodies, God will enhance the atoms and all the particles that make us physical.
Particles.
So there's a few more verses that talk about, what happens when you die. A lot of some theologians will suggest that when you die, you're just asleep.
Right. The long sleep of the soul.
The what?
The long sleep of the soul.
Sleep. Okay, I thought you said something else. Good.
Slong.
Yeah, worse.
The long sleep of the soul.
Yeah. 1 Thessalonians 4 talks about that. We don't want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. And then there's Philippians 1:21, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." So death is not the end, and that's kind of the whole point here. But
no kidding.
I was looking at, are there near-death experiences in the Bible? And I think one of the cases that people often bring up is Acts 7, where Stephen is getting stoned, and not getting high stoned. He's getting killed. And in Acts 7:56, it says, "And he said, Behold, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." And so he has a clear vision of the third heavens, and we won't get into that. But so there you go. That's kind of a near-death experience. And then the most interesting one, I think, is Paul in 2 Corinthians 12 talks about literally an outer body experience. I don't know if it's near death, but it's definitely out of body. 2 Corinthians 12, it says, "I must go on boasting. Though there is nothing to be gained by it, I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter." And that's interesting when you talk about Sean's experience, right? About hearing his name, but he couldn't really understand it or couldn't relay it into the English language.
Right. Yes. Very interesting.
So, just a couple more things here before we move on to the next story, or the last story. And that is, where are they in these near-death experiences? What are they experiencing? What's going on? Because, there seems to be some kind of physicality going on, right?
Sure.
I mean, in the stories of the Sean story, he experienced some form of physicality. It wasn't the same sort of physics that we experienced.
Yeah, he's being interacted with different beings. He's physically experiencing a different place. Although, however abnormal that place and abnormal his experiences are, he's definitely having a physical experience of some kind.
Right. And the thing is, though, a lot of Christians will talk about, oh, when you die, you're just kind of in this ethereal place.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the spirit, But if that's the case, then why is there some kind of physicality going on? And so, I guess the speculation is that perhaps in this other dimension, this realm, because, in the case of Sean's story, he wasn't in hell yet, right? He was kind of on the way. And in the story you're about to hear, same thing. The experiencer was not in the final destination. They were kind of on the way.
Right. Well, that sort of gives another little clue to the physicality, because, if it's a spiritual type of thing, you'd think you'd just open your eyes and, you've just been sort of transported to this other place. But, there is transit that happens. There's physical transit.
Yeah. So I guess the speculation is perhaps these realms are kind of a virtual reality, just so that these sort of spiritual entities can interact in some way. It's an interesting speculation, right? Because, in Luke 16, the story with Lazarus and the rich man, they're talking about physicality here. This is post-mortem, and there's like a great chasm, and the rich man experiences physical pain, but it's not so unbearable that he can't speak, so there's this weird stuff going on. And so the question is, what exactly is that dimension or realm?
Right. Well, I don't have the answer for you right now, Gons.
Well, Basil, that's too bad. I was hoping you would come through with a little bit more.
I know I have
compelling.
most of life's answers. That is one that I do not currently hold. But you had a chance to speak with somebody about their near-death experience.
Yeah, that's right. Let's check that out now.
My name is Yvonne Noctegal, and I am a survivor of a brain tumor. And during the process of the surgery to remove a 4.5 centimeter tumor from my brain, I was transported through the dark veil, I guess what you might say, to another dimension where I woke up.
She said that she grew up a Christian,
regular churchgoer,
but she didn't really know about all of the
conspiracy theories. I call it just the occult and what they're tangibly doing and how it all pulls together with prophecy and the end times and whatnot. I wasn't aware of any of that.
And it should be noted here that Yvonne was the person that got us in contact with Dane Wigington back in episode 60 when we talked about geoengineering. She was one of the webmasters at geoengineeringwatch.org until recently. But she said until her NDE experience, she considered herself a kumbaya Christian.
Since then, I've become, my friends call me intense.
The doctors told her that she had the tumor for over 7 years. And it got to the point where she was so sick that she was just completely bedridden.
Left side of my body became paralyzed.
Now, this was December 2010.
Christmas, I was, pretty much out of commission. I mean, I could barely get up to do anything at all anymore, and was finally ended up at the doctor's, put me immediately in the hospital.
Now, she mentioned this was a 4.5 centimeter mass, and she needed to get into surgery right away.
The strange thing was when they came in to the room for the first time to tell me what they'd found on the CT scan, when the doctor came in the room, he looked so nervous and he was so pale, and my impression was, oh, he's trying to tell me I'm dying. And I just read that from him, and I felt this peace. That right then and there, that this peace was with me that I can't even put it into words. But I felt this love for that doctor, and I felt so bad for him. And at that moment, it was just the beginning of something powerful that carried me through this entire thing.
And so with this peace that was over her, that can only be described as God's peace, Yvonne helped the doctor tell her that she was going to die.
It was really sort of, it was all very supernatural.
Well, they moved Yvonne over to a special neurology hospital where they set her up with a neurosurgeon.
One of the best surgeons in the United States, actually.
And when she went into surgery, she tried to stay positive and encourage everybody around her because, again, she felt
this peace. Everyone around me was so upset and crying. My children flew in. Everybody was so upset because it really didn't look good. But I just had this comfort. I knew God was holding me. And it sounds, I don't know, Christianese or something, but it was real. It was tangible. And I had no fear. I had a brief moment of fear before the surgery, the morning of the surgery, where literally I believe the enemy came in and just tried to make me afraid. And I just recited scripture and sang praise songs, and it quieted down, and he was holding me again. And I knew whether I died or whether I lived, he had me, and it was fine. It was good. It was all good.
Once the surgery began, they made an incision.
From my crown of my head to the bottom of my neck.
Then they drilled a hole at the base of her spine.
A little bit larger than a silver dollar.
And they penetrated the membrane that sits between the two hemispheres of the brain.
And approached the tumor that way because it was deep inside my brain. It wasn't right near the skull.
And they had to pull the tumor out piece by piece using this tiny little instrument.
I mean, I can't even imagine how they did it. Just crazy.
And I guess the hole is still there.
I know. When I get my hair cut, the girls, they like to massage your neck. I'm like, no. Keep your thumb out of my brain.
So getting back to what she experienced, she was under anesthesia and...
surgery started, I guess, and next thing I knew, I was sitting there and I was wide awake. And, it took me a second to sort of start getting my bearings. And I looked around me, and this was not a dream. This was very much, I was wide awake. My thoughts were very clear, more clear than they are here, but that, I'm sort of spacey anyway. But my thoughts were very clear, and nothing was, how dreams, little things fade in and out, and you can't quite put it all together. This was very realistic. I was in a place that wasn't the hospital room, and there was this, first of all, the beautiful colors of gold and auburn and these beautiful colors. What is this? This was a massive wing. What I was looking at, these beautiful colors were this massive wing, I would guess, 50 feet long. It was huge. And it was holding me. And I started to sort of realize that what I was seeing, what I was experiencing, and I realized I didn't make it. Okay. And there was love. There was peace. Like, it's beyond description. The love that you have when you hold your baby for the first time. That love was directed at me. Just this immense rest and peace and love. And this unbelievable, I was so fascinated with this wing that was holding me, and I knew I was being held by an angel, and I realized that all this time that I'd been having that peace from the very beginning when the doctor walked in, he'd been holding me already then. He was already there, and now I was just, through the veil, seeing what was there, but I wasn't able to see it before. And I reached down to try to touch this because the wing was made of something that didn't exist in this world. It was real, it was solid, it wasn't just spirit, he had mass of some sort to him. And the best way that I can describe it sounds very much like all of the biblical descriptions of visions that prophets have seen of angels. But he was like gold, if gold were liquid and semi-transparent, or like a gemstone if it was perfectly pure. There aren't words really to describe how beautiful what this being was made out of was. It brings tears to my eyes to even try to describe him. He was glorious. I guess that's the best word. I reached my hand out to try to touch him, almost like a baby, to try to feel what he was. It didn't occur to me that I didn't see my hand. A lot of things occurred to me afterward. But there were even veins. I don't know. I could see the tiniest structure of how he was made. I was able to see in a perfect way somehow. It was different than my eyes here were able to see. That was all very fascinating to me because I'm extremely visual anyway, and so that was really a focus, was how I could see so intently, and I was just in love with where I was. So this was good. He was carrying me somewhere. We were going somewhere, and I knew, I was going to meet the Lord. I knew that I was going to see Jesus. I was so happy. I was so at peace. Thinking for a moment about my family, they're going to be sad. They're going to be heartbroken. But the instant that I even thought about them, I knew, he had them. God had them. They were fine. He was going to take care of them. And so it was instantly no fear, no sorrow there. And then it hit me, and this was a powerful, extremely powerful thing, that I thought back on my family, and I thought back on this world, and everything that I'd ever done wrong had never happened. And that's real hard to describe, because there was some sense of an awareness of that I had done things wrong, of sin, but it had never happened. It wasn't just forgotten. It wasn't just under the blood. It had literally, in this realm, wherever I was, it wasn't there. It wasn't allowed to go there. That was it was pretty mind-boggling. But I wasn't mind-boggled at that point. It was just it's more mind-boggling when I come back here and I try to, think it through again. There, it simply was the way things were. It was just separated. That, wow, it never happened. And I turned my attention back to where I'd come from, the world. And this also stays with me a lot. This comes to me a lot. That the world was, I thought back on it, and I was like, that's all it was? It was just this brief little blink in time. It was this tiny little moment. It was not at all this, oh my goodness, how we are so concerned about all the things in this world and our worries and the things we strive for, the things that we think are so important and struggle for and travail over. There, I just thought, oh my gosh, I had it all wrong. Most of everything there was complete vanity. It didn't matter. It was just this blip in time. None of that even mattered. And the only thing that mattered the only thing that mattered was that I knew Jesus Christ. Was all that mattered. And I didn't even think about it in those words at that point. It was more of a, oh, wow, I understand. I saw that. And I looked at thinking of everyone in the world and how they were running around just in this artificial reality that wasn't reality at all. And here I was outside of it, and gosh, I would have loved to tell them, but here I was. Just that, none of it was real. The only thing that was real is the Lord. The only thing that was real is Jesus. And all my sins being having never happened, I think I really experienced my salvation like I'd never understood it before.
Now, it was around this time when Yvonne looked down and she saw a large mass of people.
A crowd, but they didn't look the same as they look here. I saw things differently somehow, which is, I'm sorry, that's really hard. I can't put words on it really to describe how things look different. But it was as though they were made of something which was not in the realm I was in. And they were almost like silhouettes, but they were three-dimensional.
She said she could see them, but they were really dark, and she could see a faint light emanating from them.
And they also had almost an aura around them. And somehow I perceived that they were the saints. They were the Christians. Because they had the spirit, the same glow to them that this angel had. I understood. But they were talking to one another. I didn't hear them. I only saw them. And one or two of them had their hands up in the air. And I was just looking at them, and that's when the angel spoke to me. And he had a beautiful voice. I can still hear it, but I can't describe it. It's just powerful and beautiful and gentle. And he said to me, "The multitude is petitioning for you." Yeah. It still makes me cry. And it touched me, just, really. And about that time, I felt a sensation in my leg, like an electric shock. And I thought, what? How can I feel anything in my leg, right? And I realized, they're working on me. They're still working on me. And I was aware they're trying to bring me back.
All clear?
And so I was a little bit in both dimensions at that point. It's so hard to explain some of this stuff. It sounds so...
Sure, you're doing great. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, it is. I know. It's amazing. So I felt that, and at the same time, still just, my mind, everything about what I was doing, it was just, I couldn't wait for the next thing. If I shared this story with people before, the things that a lot of times with people who've lost loved ones is to comfort them that, these children or those people that are in Christ, they're not sad. They know you're okay, and they're so excited about where they are. it's just like, this is the reward. This is the, after, you're done with your work and you rest now. And it's joy, it's fulfillment, and you're just excited. You're happy. It's like, what comes next? Because the beauty is just, you want to see more and more of it. And the love is like nothing you've ever felt.